皆さん、こんにちは。私はソフィア・ドルタです。よろしくお願いします。Hello everyone, my name is Sofía Dorta. Welcome to my presentation. And today's talk is called 日本語ができるようになってしまった。I accidentally learned Japanese. 少し自己紹介したいと思います。私はソフィア・ドルタと申します。17歳でチリ人です。高卒のスペイン語教師です。My name is Sofía Dorta. I am 17 years old. I am from Chile, and I'm a high school graduate who is currently volunteering as a Spanish tutor. 僕はスペイン語と英語です。それでできる言語は日本語や中国語、それで少しのフランス語やエスペラント語です。My native languages are Spanish and English, and I can speak Japanese, Chinese, and a little bit of French and Esperanto. 言語学が大好きで、将来は通訳になりたいです。I really like linguistics, and in the future, I would like to become an interpreter. どうしてなってしまったと言いましたか？実は11歳の時からずっと中国語を勉強しています。それは中国語の文化とコンピュータサイエンスに興味があり、中国語は未来の言語と呼ばれていますから、中国語を勉強することになりました。同時に、子供の頃から日本語のゲームが趣味だったので、いつも日本語を読んだり聞いていました。少しずつ中国語ができるようになりましたが、だんだん日本語も気になってきました。いつか日本語を勉強したいと思い、日本語教師を探し始めました。自分で少し勉強したことがあったので、初心者のコースから始めたくなかったです。日本語が少しできる人のコースに参加して、とても驚きました。紹介のクラスから少し話すことができました。So actually, I've been studying Chinese ever since I was 11 years old. Just mainly because I'm really interested in Chinese culture and also computer science. So since Chinese has been called the language of the future and also of computing, I decided to learn Chinese. I thought it would be a really good idea. But at the same time, I've always been in contact with Japanese because I love video games and I've always done. So while my Mandarin slowly improved, I also started becoming really interested in learning Japanese. So one day I actually decided to go ahead and pursue the language, and I started looking for a Japanese teacher. I didn't want to start with a course for beginners since I had done some self-study. So eventually I settled for a course for people who could already speak some Japanese, And I was really surprised because I could speak from the first class, and I hadn't really done formal studies, so that was very surprising. どうしてできましたか？日本語を自分で勉強したことがあったけど、教科書を使って漢字や文法をちゃんと勉強したことがありませんでした。それでどうして話せるようになりましたか？どうやって日本語を習いましたか？ Well, I had done some self-study in the past, but I never quite studied kanji nor had I studied grammar properly. So then, why could I speak and how did I learn Japanese?つまり、スライドにあるもののせいです。日本の大衆文化が好きなこと。日本語でゲームをして音楽を聴いて、だんだん日本語をわかるようになりました。好きなゲームには日本語の音声がありますので、初めは理解できなかったけれど、たくさん聞いて少しずつ言葉を理解できるようになりました。まだ初心者でしたが、日本語の発音や丁寧語とタメ語の違いはよくわかりました。その時は文法と単語の勉強はしていませんでしたが、日本語を簡単に理解できるようになりました。もちろん、今は日本語を正式に勉強しています。インターネットで日本人の先生と話をしているうちに、日本語のレベルが上がりました。ゲームをするときや音楽を聴くときに日本語が分かってきて本当に嬉しいです。Well, basically, I blame the things on the slide. So, by playing games and listening to music in Japanese, I gradually began to understand the language. My favorite games have Japanese voice acting on them, And while I couldn't understand it first, after listening to a lot of Japanese, I slowly started comprehending some things. Like I started thinking, wow, this word has something to do with this other word, and this can mean something else. And slowly I kind of started piecing it together. Although obviously I was still a beginner, I knew Japanese pronunciation and the difference between polite and formal speech. And although I didn't study grammar or vocabulary at that time, I was able to easily understand some Japanese. Of course, I'm currently studying Japanese properly. My Japanese has also improved a lot since I started talking to my online tutor. So now when I listen to Japanese music or I play games, I'm really happy because I can finally understand the language. 今使っているリソースはこれです。プレゼンテーションの終わりに少し実感したいと思います。じゃあ、あなたも日本語を勉強したいでしょ？英語をわかりたい。日本に旅行したい。だから今から伝える勉強方法がおすすめですよ。These are the resources I'm using right now, which I'll introduce a bit at the end of the presentation. But I'm sure you want to study Japanese too. Like I want to understand movies or I want to travel to Japan. So I'm going to give some tips on what I recommend. 言語を学ぶにはたくさん聞いて読んだ方が自然に学べると思う人がいます。でも音楽で言語を学ぶのはちょっとおかしい気がすると思う人もいます。歌詞は詩的な単語を使い、発音も普段の発音とは違います。しかし、音楽で学ぶことは一つの利点があります。その利点は単語を楽しく覚えることです。While immersion is pretty much universally accepted as the most natural way to learn a language, I've often heard people discourage people from learning with music because either the language is too poetic or the pronunciation is just different from standard speech. But I actually think music is really good for one thing, and that is making vocabulary stick. 例えば、これは私が好きなヨルシカというバンドの歌詞です。言葉は全部日常的に使う表現です。いつもその歌は私の頭にあるので、私が知らなかった不思議という単語を簡単に覚えることができました。例はたくさんありますが、好きな日本の音楽を聴いて、歌詞を読んで簡単に単語を覚えることができると思います。でも日本語には肯定アクセントというものがあります。それで話すときに声を高くしたり低くすることでそれぞれの意味が違ってきます。歌を聴くときは肯定アクセントが聞こえないのでアクセントがある辞書を使った方がいいと思います。それでインターネットで日本人が録音した例がありますので知らない言葉が出てきたときに発音や録音を見つける方もいいと思います。そして歌はよく詩的なので古い単語があると信じている人が多いですがそれは違う作家によることだと思います。古い単語を使う作家がいますが現代日常的な単語を使う作家もいます。多聴多読したらよく使う単語と古い単語を分けるようになると思います。もちろん音楽以外日本語を聞くのが必要です。でも音楽にも利点があると思います。歌詞動画も役に立つと思います。聞くながら歌詞を読むことがとても勉強になったと思います。だから日本の音楽が好きなら歌の歌詞動画を見つけた方がいいですよ。歌を聴いて同時に言葉を読んだら漢字ももっと楽に覚えることができると思います。So, for example, these are lyrics to a song I really like by a band called Yorushika. All of the words in the song are very basic, common expressions. So, since that song is kind of perpetually stuck in my head, I was able to easily remember the word fushigi, or mysterious, which I didn't know before. There are many examples, but I think you can memorize words really easily by listening to your favorite Japanese music and reading the lyrics. However, Japanese has pitch accent, which basically means that the meaning of words depends on whether you make your voice higher or you lower your voice. So that's why I think it's really important to have a dictionary that has pitch accents. There are a few, which I will talk about more in a few slides. There's also, this is kind of like in most tonal languages, right? Like Japanese is not technically a tonal language, but it's also like in Chinese. Usually when you sing in Chinese, you don't pronounce the tones. So that's why I really recommend you both find a dictionary that has pitch accent and also native recordings by people, because computers can kind of mess up pitch accent sometimes. So you can find a lot of example recordings by Japanese people online. So when you come across a new word, it's really useful to look up the pronunciation and the recording. So songs are usually poetic in nature. Many people believe that most music has old language, but I think that depends on the writer. There are artists that do use old vocabulary, but there are also artists who use modern daily vocabulary. I think this is especially true in like J-pop or just like popular J-rock. Popular Japanese music usually has very casual vocabulary, which I think can be really useful. If you listen and read a lot, you will be able to distinguish between frequently used words and old words in time. Of course, it's necessary to listen to Japanese other than music, but I think music has its benefits too. I think lyric videos can be really helpful because I learned a lot from just reading the lyrics while listening to music. So I recommend watching lyric videos, as hearing the pronunciation and reading at the same time can even help you learn kanji more easily because you'll be exposed to them. それで歌が苦手でも歌いながら発音が自然になってくると思いますので歌ってみて。Even if you don't like singing, your pronunciation will probably improve as you sing and it's going to feel more natural. So I encourage everyone to try it. It's kind of like shadowing, but if you like singing, you might find it a lot more fun. 個人的にフラッシュカードが好きなので歌で聞いた例文をよく使います。例えば、インターネットでダウンロードしたフラッシュカードには見つめるという言葉が書いてありました。好きな歌にもこの言葉を聞いたことがあったので、フラッシュカードに歌詞の例文を書きました。このように単語を簡単に覚えます。I personally really like flashcards, so I usually, if I hear an example in a song, I tend to write it down. For example, I downloaded a set of flashcards that had this one specifically on it with the word mitsumeru, which means like looking at or gazing. I heard this word in a song I liked, so I decided to add it. And that helped me remember the word a lot more easily because when I see the flashcard, I kind of sing that lyric in my head and that makes it stick more easily. じゃあ少し漢字の話をしたいと思います。I would like to talk a little bit about kanji. 私は中国語を勉強しているので、漢字を読むのは難しくなかったけれど、少しアドバイスがあります。スライドに書いてある漢字を見て関係がありそうですね。漢字には音読みと訓読みというものがあります。音読みとは中国からの読み方です。そして訓読みとは日本語の本来の読み方です。それぞれの漢字は訓読みが違いますが、音読みには関係があります。音読みが中国から来ますので、中国語の発音と似ている漢字があります。例えば、中という漢字は中とも読みます。他の漢字にもこの漢字の部分はあるところで、その漢字も中と読むことがあります。例えばこのスライドの漢字は全部中と読みます。音読みは。So I'm learning Chinese, and I have been for quite a while, so it wasn't really that hard for me to learn kanji, but I do have some advice for those who don't speak Chinese. And the thing is, look at the kanji written on a slide. So do you think there's a connection between them? Kanji has readings called onyomi and kunyomi. Onyomi is the original Chinese reading, or at least the Japanese adaptation, and kunyomi are the Japanese readings. So basically what was already in the language before they adapted Chinese characters. So while usually kunyomi tend to differ between different words, the onyomi tends to have a very specific relationship because they all come from Middle Chinese. So for example, the first kanji here is pronounced naka, but it's also pronounced chu. And all of the kanji in this slide are pronounced chu as well when it comes to onyomi readings because they have the naka radical in it. この漢字はどう読むでしょう? So, how do you read this kanji? Well, it's also read chu. chu とも読めます。それで他の関係があります。中国語ができるなら漢字の音読みを当てることができるかもしれません。意味もよく似ています。例えば、この漢字は全部中国語ではしと読みます。それで音読みが似ていますよ。スライドに書いてある漢字はこのように読みます。There are other relationships. So, for example, if you speak Chinese, you can probably guess the onyomi of kanji because both the modern Mandarin, or I've heard that Cantonese is closer, but at least for Mandarin, they do come from Middle Chinese as well. So, the onyomi readings of kanji and the readings of Mandarin's hansi tend to be similar. For example, all of these kanji are pronounced shi or some variant of that in Chinese. That's why all the onyomi readings are so similar. The kanji on this slide are read like this. Ji, shi, shiki, shi, shitsu, shi. So they all derive from the same Middle Chinese reading, and that's why they're so similar. Now some advice. 教科書が必要ですか? 初心者ならやっぱり役に立つけど、たくさん聞いて、たくさん読んだ方がいいと思います。実は、はじめにわからない文法や単語が多すぎるので、聞いたり読んだりのみしたら、文章の意味がわからなくて、日本語力を上達する機会がないと思います。でも、教科書やだんだん文法を教えるコースをしながら、たくさん読んだり聞いたり方が最高だと思います。はじめに、カナの読み方を勉強して、教科書やコースを使って初心者のいい制限本を読んだ方がおすすめですよ。So if you're still a beginner, it's definitely useful to use a textbook, but I do still think it's really important to get a lot of input, both listening and reading. Because the truth is, when you start learning Japanese, there will be too many words and grammatical structures that you won't know. So even if you only listen to and read Japanese, you still won't understand the meaning of the sentences. So I don't think that's going to give you an opportunity to improve your skills. But I think both things are very important. It's important to, have some sort of systematic study of grammar and vocabulary, and at the same time get a lot of input. This is why I think textbooks might be useful, but it's still the best to get a lot of input, like audio while studying with a textbook. So I recommend finding a textbook or a course that introduces grammar gradually and slowly. And at the beginning, I recommend that you learn how to read the kana, obviously, and then use a textbook or course that is, I guess, designed more like to learn Japanese naturally, and at the same time start using graded readers and just get a lot of both reading and listening input. フラッシュカードは私はフラッシュカードが大好きだけど日本語が全然わからないならフラッシュカードだけで勉強するのは大変だと思います。というのは単語をたくさん知っていても文法がわからないなら一般的な意味がわかりません。だけどフラッシュカードで基本的な単語を勉強することは役に立って簡単に読めるようになると思います。知らない言葉が出てきたときにフラッシュカードを使って SRS システムとか紙カードとかでよく言葉を勉強する方がおすすめですよ。So I personally really like flashcards, but if you don't know any Japanese, again, learning just through flashcards can be really tough. That's because even if you know a lot of vocabulary, if you don't understand the grammar, you're not going to understand what a sentence means. However, learning basic vocabulary through flashcards is helpful and can help you improve your reading skills easily. When you come across an unknown word in a text or video, create a flashcard, be it through an SRS system like Anki or using paper cards, and study them often. At my stage, I mostly use them to reinforce passive vocabulary, as well as to learn some extra useful vocab through pre-made decks occasionally. I really like using flashcards to prepare for reading articles or books. For example, I'm currently preparing to read a book by studying flashcards based on the vocabulary and phrases from the book, so I can read them in context. While that does kind of spoil the fun of reading the book once you actually get there, it's definitely going to make you feel more prepared for the book. And it works because I know the vocabulary will be helpful in the future, so I'll have more motivation to learn those words. So if I just go through a deck someone else made, which has no connection to my life, that's not going to be that motivating because I won't have a reason to actually want to learn that vocab. But if I know that I'm going to see these words as soon as I finish the deck and start reading the book, that's going to give me more reasons to actually want to learn the vocab. That makes sense. 教材の紹介、resources。丸ごとは、教科書がありますが、無料のオンラインコースもあります。コースでは文法の説明や聴解や読解の練習もできます。録音があり、聴解を中心にするので、初心者におすすめです。Marugoto is a textbook, but there's also free online courses based on the books. The course includes grammar explanations and listening and reading comprehension practice. I really recommend this for beginners because of all the audio and listening exercises, because these courses are best for those who are just starting and would like to learn Japanese very organically. So the fact that they have a lot of audio specifically is really important because you'll get to hear what the language sounds like. Most of the learning in this course is done through watching the videos, there's dialogues, and then answering the questions to check your understanding. So if you do decide to take the courses, make sure to take both Katsudo and Rikai because they're different courses, and there's on the website you can take both at the same time, because Katsudo is mostly like conversational Japanese, and then Rikai is where all the grammar starts. 今日は文法のガイドサイトです。サイトの人は日本人じゃないですが、日本語のアドバイスをもらったことがありますからおすすめです。Imabi is a grammar guide site. The person who wrote it is in Japanese, but he has gotten a lot of advice and corrections from Japanese people, so I still will recommend it. And I love this site because it presents a highly organized approach to Japanese grammar, and the explanations are all really in depth. So sometimes when I'm watching like a movie or reading a book and I don't understand something, sometimes I just look it up on Imabi because it's really convenient. So yeah, I really recommend this. GLPT 先生は GLPT を受ける人のが対象のサイトです。短い文法の説明があります。GLPT Sensei is basically like a site for people who are taking the GLPT. But even if you're not taking the test, I do recommend the website because they have short grammar explanations for very common grammar. It's all by level, and there are example sentences, which I find really useful. ことアカデミーは日本では日本語学校です。YouTube チャンネルではいろいろな文法説明動画があります。And Koto Academy is a Japanese language school in Japan, but their YouTube channel has a lot of grammar explanation videos. And I really like their channel because of the explanations, because they're all in very slow and comprehensible Japanese with examples and even occasional acting. で、日本語多読とはたくさん読んで理解できるようになるという意味です。このサイトでは無料の本がたくさんあります。レベル0は一番簡単で、レベル5は一番難しいです。カナを覚えてすぐにレベル0を読み始めた方がおすすめですよ。So, Nihongo Tadoku is a website that's basically shaped around the philosophy that the right way to learn a language is by reading a lot and not checking the dictionary. I don't necessarily agree with that, but the website is extremely useful because they have graded readers from level 0, which is basically you don't know anything but how to pronounce the alphabet, syllabary, and then level 5 is like actual, I think it's around N3 level based on the GLPT. I really recommend this to beginners because level 0 is literally like, I don't know, someone pointing at something and saying that, and then someone holding something and saying this. So even from the first level, it's really helpful if you want to learn Japanese organically. I'll show screenshots in a second. Natively とは、日本語のこのサイトでは日本語の本を探したり、レビューしたり、あなたの日本語レベルに合う本を見つけることもできます。 例えば私は今子供の小説の夜カフェというシリーズを読んでいます。最初の6章は難しかったけれど、本を読みながら単語を覚えてだんだんわかるようになりました。今、第3話を読んでいます。So Natively is a site where you can search for and review Japanese books and even find books that match your Japanese level. So for example, I'm currently reading a series of children's novels called Yoru Cafe. The first 6 chapters were really hard. As I read the book, I slowly started memorizing some of the vocabulary and gradually started understanding more and more. So I'm currently reading a third book, and my comprehension went from what I would consider to be around 70% where I first started to around 95% in the third book. So I recommend reading long series because this guarantees you'll be stuck seeing the same words for a while as authors tend to repeat vocabulary. This is also as series get so much easier to read as you go on. So even though the first book was hard, now in the third book, because the author keeps using the same words over and over again, I kind of have no choice but to remember them, right? So actually, yes, an anecdote, I just learned what the word gyoza, as in like the Chinese kind of like buns thingy, is because the word kept coming up in the book, so eventually I had to learn it. And 最後はヨミちゃん。ヨミちゃんとはブラウザーの拡張機能です。本来のプログラムは開発をやめ、新しい読みたんというプロジェクトが開発されています。ブラウザでは日本語で読んでいるときはテキストの上でホーバーすると辞書が開く機能があります。音声や肯定アクセントもあり、暗記にフラッシュカードを保存機能もあります。その上、文をコピーすると、それぞれの言葉の意味が見える辞書ウィンドウが開いてきます。だから私が大好きなリソースです。So finally, Yamichan is a browser extension. It was sunsetted or discontinued by the original devs, but there's a new fork for the project called Yomitan that's actively being developed. The extension works as a hover dictionary for your browser, so when reading Japanese text online, you can hover over a word and see its definitions, listen to native recordings, and even automatically clear Anki sentence cards. There's also a function in which you can copy text and it lets you see the definition of every word. So I really recommend it. While it's not ideal to grow too dependent on hover dictionaries, granted, I've been guilty of this, the flexibility of Yamichan and the fact that you can import Japanese to Japanese dictionaries makes it an invaluable resource to me. So I think what I love about Yamichan the most is that it kind of helped me get to the point where I can read Japanese definitions in Japanese because you can import all sorts of dictionaries. I have a few Japanese to English dictionaries for help still, but I try to rely mostly on the Japanese to Japanese dictionaries. These are all screenshots. これは日本語多読のサイトです。This is 日本語多読。これは natively のサイトです。This is natively. それで、これは読みちゃんという実証の機能です。And this is the extension Yomitan, which I was talking about. So as you can see, you can hover over words or you can copy them and it opens a dictionary. And you can have audio, you can get the pitch accent information. So it's just overall a really helpful tool. 教科書が好きなら多分つまらなくても教科は好きなもので練習するのが最高だと思います。というのはよく読んで文法を勉強して日本語を聞く時もわかると思いますが、聴解が難しいところでスピードをもっと遅くして聞きながら言葉を書くのは役に立つと思います。そして毎日日本語で動画を見た方がおすすめですよ。私は YouTube では好きなものについて動画を見ながら言葉をたくさん覚えて読むときも聞くときも少しずつ理解が上達すると思います。私にとって音楽も役に立ちますが、主に動画やポッドキャストを聞いた方がいいと思います。日本のゲームには音声がよくありますので、ゲームが好きなら音声があるゲームをするのが楽しいだけではなくて日本語の聴解も上達するかもしれません。そしたらあなたが好きなトピックについて単語を覚えることができます。例えば私が好きなのはミステリーです。 今、ファミコン探偵クラブという音声があるミステリーのゲームをしています。ゲームをしながら音声を聞いて、言葉の正式の発音や固定アクセントを覚えて、探偵の話によくある単語も覚えています。指紋とか遺言書とか、そんな単語を覚えて、将来にはもう一つ探偵の話を読んだら、こんな言葉をもう知っているので、簡単にわかります。その上、こんなゲームには理解が第一で、理解できないならゲームが進んでいきません。So if you like textbooks, you might not find listening practice sections too boring, but I personally recommend practicing by listening to content that you enjoy, and from day one. So you can improve your listening skills by, ironically, reading a lot, studying grammar, and then listening to Japanese. If you find listening comprehension too difficult, I recommend slowing down the content you're listening to and writing down the words while listening, like a dictation exercise. I also think it's really important to practice listening every day, even if it's just 5 minutes. I found that making a habit of sitting down and listening to natural Japanese has really improved my overall skills. As for me, I think that by watching videos of things I like on YouTube, I've been able to memorize a lot of words and gradually improve my comprehension both when reading and listening. For me, music does help, but I prefer watching videos and listening to podcasts. Japanese games often have audio, so if you like games, playing games with audio will not only be fun, but it may also improve your Japanese listening and reading skills. This can also help you memorize vocabulary and on any topic you like. For example, I like mysteries, and I'm currently playing a mystery game which has voice acting called Famicom Detective Club. So while playing the game, you can listen to the audio, which helps me memorize the pitch accents and the pronunciations of words. And in this case, even learn words that are common in detective stories. For example, words like fingerprints or testaments, etc. So in the future, when I read another detective story, I'll already know these words, and that will improve my reading comprehension and speed. On top of that, comprehension is a priority in a game like this, because if you can't understand it, you won't be able to progress in a game. Whatever kind of content you end up going for, the most important thing is that you enjoy it and it helps you stay motivated. 私がよく見るチャンネルはこれらです。私は主に練習のためにいろいろな日本語の勉強とは無関係のチャンネルの動画を見ますが、これらのチャンネルは全部日本語の勉強と関係があるものです。So these are channels I watch really often. I usually watch unrelated content in Japanese on YouTube, but these channels specifically all have to do with the study of Japanese. And I particularly recommend Kaname Naito, apart from being really useful in the way he explains grammar. He's just really funny to watch, so I recommend his channel a lot. そして、料理とハンドメイドのチャンネルのリードは動画を見ながら説明を聞くので、言葉の意味をよく理解できることです。例えば、ピザの作り方の動画を見ながら、動画の人はまず野菜を洗いますと言い、野菜を洗い始めます。こんな動画は分かりやすくて見るのも楽しいと思いますよ。ハンドメイドも同じです。このように単語をたくさん覚えると思います。So I also really recommend watching cooking or craft videos, and the benefits of this are that while you watch the video, you'll hear an explanation of what the person is doing. So, for example, if you're watching a video on how to make pizza, they're going to say, first we'll wash the vegetables, and then they'll proceed to wash veggies on screen. So that's going to really aid your comprehension, especially if you're just starting out. These videos aren't just easy to understand, but they can be really fun to watch, especially because they give you insight into the culture of the language. So it's the same thing for craft videos, because obviously they're going to be like, I don't know, and then you draw over this piece of paper and they'll show the drawing. So if you like that kind of thing, they can also be really helpful. So in this way, you'll be able to learn a lot of vocab really easily. じゃあ私はまた初心者であったら何が違いますか？きっとちゃんと文法を中心にして私のレベルに合う本を読むと思います。それで一安くはしません。代わりに毎日30分以上読んで文法をゆっくり覚えます。実は初めに主に日本人が好きな映画を見たりゲームをしたりしていたのでわからない文章が多すぎました。だから 勉強し始めたとき、よくわからなくて、時々意味を間違っていました。先生と話せば話すほど、それにちゃんと勉強して読めば読むほど理解が上達しました。だから、初心者へのおすすめは、丸ごとのオンラインコースをして、多読の簡単な絵本を読んで、好きなことをしながら、できるだけ日本語を聞くことです。そうやって少しずつ日本語ができるようになります。So what would I do differently if I were a beginner again? A lot of things. I'm sure I'd read I'd read books that actually suit my level and focus on grammar. I would also avoid cramming, which I'm so guilty of. And instead, I'd read for at least 30 minutes every day and slowly memorize grammar. In the beginning, I was mainly consuming native level content, so there were too many sentences that I simply didn't understand. So when I started studying, I didn't really understand some things, and sometimes I completely misunderstood the meaning of words or sentences. The more I talked to my teacher and the more I studied and read, the better my understanding became. So my recommendation for beginners is, well, specifically to take the Marugoto online course, read some simple picture books from Tadoku, and listen to as much Japanese as possible while doing things you like. So in this way, you will be able to speak Japanese little by little. I hope this was helpful to someone, and I wish you all the best in your Japanese studies. みんな頑張ってください。Right, I'm going to read some questions. チリの風のスペイン語にも肯定アクセントのようなものというアクセントもありますが、チリ風スペイン語、ソフィアさんにとっては肯定アクセントを覚えるのはどうでしたか？私にとって主に例えば私がゲームが大好きので、音声があるゲームをしながら、動画を見ながら、映画を見ながら、そんなことをしながら、肯定アクセントがちょっと覚えやすくなりましたけど、ねえ、難しくなかったけど、じゃあ、おすすめは多分私がフラッシュカードが好きなので、フラッシュカードには録音をつけて、それで毎日その録音を聞いて、それで、楽になりましたと思います。でも、私には大変じゃなかったけど、すみません。アドバイスはちょっと。でも、チリのスペイン語には肯定アクセントがあるかな。そんなこと聞いたことないと思いますけど、ね、多分ありますね。聞いたことありません。じゃあ、それで、聞いてくれてありがとうございます。Thank you all for listening.